What's your most NSFW family moment? Story 1. Thought it would be a good idea to make breakfast for my dad and stepmom. Cooked it all, got it ready, and bought the plates in and thought bringing it in unannounced would be a wonderful surprise. I was not greeted by smiles. Instead, I was presented by an image that is forever burnt into my mind. My dad under the covers, obviously plugging away with my stepmom's head, hanging off the side of the bed, with her eyes closed and showing me her O-face. I retreated quickly, but my brain went, well, better put that in permanent storage and make it one of the clearest memories possible. Don't worry, you won't be forgetting any detail at all. Story 2. I was at my first real girlfriend's house when I was in high school. We would have fun in the basement, finished basement, when her family was home to avoid any walk-ins. After I finished, it was common practice to tie the rhubarb in a knot and avoid throwing it in the trash bin to avoid the mom finding it when she was cleaning. So I left it on top of the ping-pong table, thinking I could take it upstairs with me when we decided to leave. The ping-pong table was right next to the couch. Well, I screwed up. Her father and little brother thought it was a good time to go downstairs and play ping-pong. The brother gets to the table first, sees the used rubber, picks it up, the load of semen just dangling there, holds it out, turns to his father and says, "Dad, what is this?" The dad's face was of sheer terror as he screamed at his son to drop it, grabbed his wrist and stomped upstairs, all while not breaking eye contact with me. I guess that instilled a fear of birth control into the poor girl. She got knocked up in college by a man her dad's age. Story 3. Back when I was in high school, I worked with my girlfriend on weekends. After work, we'd go back to her house and usually had 2-ish hours before her parents came home. On some days, we'd take a nap. Other days, we'd watch a movie or fool around, etc. One fateful Saturday, our nap session turned into having fun. As an aside, she was pretty loud, especially when she thought no one was home. So, we get started and everything is coming along nicely when all of a sudden, there's some aggressive banging on her bedroom door. Of course, we freak out, get dressed, and open the door only to find that it was her sister's boyfriend messing with us. So, we shut the door and get back to business in a much more aggressive manner than initially. Her moaning is now more like yelling and I'm humping with reckless abandon when again there's another round of banging on the door. This time we ignore it and keep going for another 10-ish seconds before we hear Dad scream at us through the door. He drove me home in his police cruiser immediately after that, 45-ish minutes in silence with his shotgun in the back seat and a rhubarb still on me. Story 4. When I was a kid, around 8 years old, the PlayStation was in my parents' room, and we usually went to that room to play Gran Turismo with my little brother, which essentially consisted of driving a Suzuki Escudo at full throttle, never hitting the brakes once for the duration of the race, and still whining one lap ahead from everybody. Once he got angry about something and threw his controller away, detaching it from the console, and it ended up landing on my parents' wardrobe. We were small, so we tried climbing on the thing to get to it and ended up making a lot of the stuff on there falling on us. I felt a soft object hitting my forehead. It looked like a really big dong. My brother took it from the ground, wondering what that was. I took it from him, and yes, that was defiantly what I thought I was. Innocent me back then thought it was supposed to go on a mannequin or something, because I had never seen a mannequin naked, and figured that they had them too. For some reason I instinctively threw it back up the wardrobe, but my little bro had already dashed downstairs telling my parents we found something strange in their bedroom. So my parents dashed upstairs and asked me what it was. I told them we found something that looked like a plastic horse dong, and threw it back up. Since then, we've had the PlayStation in our room. Story 5. I got a cramp in that spot of muscle under the lower jaw, the one directly under the tongue, while I was eating out my girlfriend. I stopped and fell on the floor, trying to massage the muscle to relax, because it hurt like hell. My GF was super pissed, because she was seconds away from finishing, but she saw me and tried to help me. So we're both there in the living room in my apartment, half naked. Then I see the front door open. My parents, younger brother, and a few of my teenage cousins started walking in. It was a surprise visit, and they just decided to let themselves in without even knocking. My dad was first in, and the sight of my GF's butt was there to greet him. I don't think I should continue this. You kinda get the picture. Story 6. I was helping my then-boyfriend's sister move into a new place, and the keys were at the new house, and someone needed to go get them. So my boyfriend and I drove over to get them. While we were there, we did a little exploring of the new empty house. We realized there was an attic and opened the ceiling door to let the steps down. I climbed up first, and being in a skirt gave my boyfriend a nice view. We ended up having fun right there on the attic ladder, and right in the middle we hear the door open, boyfriend's name called out, a pause, and then the door shut. We sheepishly return to the rest of the family at the old house to find his sister trying not to laugh hysterically. She says their mother came over to try to find out what was taking so long. Upon her return, she just loudly exclaimed, "They were banging." To this day, it's our favorite phrase to exclaim. Story 7. I was back in town to see my family, and I met up with my dad and stepmom. They were out drinking with some of our closest family friends. Well, after about an hour or so, they are getting pretty drunk and rowdy. I notice the women, including my stepmom, start getting real flirtatious with each other. Mind you, there are 5 couples, including my parents, at this gathering. I watch it continue, and I have to admit, I'm a little uncomfortable, seeing all these people I grew up around being overly frisky in public and in general. After a while, I finally said, "What the freak is going on here?" to my parents. My stepmom started laughing and replied drunkenly with, "To be honest, you're the only one in this room I haven't have fun." Needless to say, I left quickly after that. Story 8. I was house-sitting for my grandparents many moons ago, and I had to get a fresh sheet. When I lifted the first one, lo and behold, there was my grandmother's vibrator. I kept that secret for years. When I eventually told my mom about it, her only reaction was, "Your grandfather is impotent." I was weirded out, but now I just laugh about it. Edit. There seems to be some confusion about the impotency, and obviously my grandfather wasn't always impotent. It happened with age. On a different and not entirely unrelated note, he is not my biological grandfather, so he could be my grandfather regardless. Story 9. I was on a road trip with my parents and the family dog after my brother went to college, and we checked into a hotel room with 2 queen beds. My parents took one, the dog and I were in the other. My dad wanted to gross me out and said, "Now son, if you hear anything in the middle of the night, keep your eyes on that wall," and pointed behind me with one hand, putting his arm around my disgusted mom with the other. I put my arm around the dog and said, "Okay, but I expect the same courtesy." Story 10. Farsquan on Thanksgiving, many years ago, my mom got the bright idea that before eating, we would go around the table and everyone would share what they were thankful for. My dad told her repeatedly that he wasn't doing that, and that was a bad idea. But she insisted, so we're sitting there at the table waiting to see what happens. My whole family was in attendance: brother, sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins, and my grandmother. My dad volunteers to go first, and the look on my mom's face is one where she's trying to decide if she should be worried about what he's going to say, mixed with wondering if he just decided to play along. My dad says, "I'm thankful that I'm 50 years old and I can still get a rock hard." Half the table died laughing, half the table was uncomfortable, my mom was pissed, and my dad got exactly what he wanted and stopped that whole process in its tracks. Then it was dinner time. Story 11. When I was still in school, I came home with my girlfriend at the time. We're upstairs in my room and she's giving me a head. Across the room, I see the door start to slowly and ridiculously silently open. In walks my father. Sees me, sees her. Most awkward eye contact ever. In a panic, I do the only thing I could think of. I point him out the door. Just as quietly as he came in, he was gone again. And on that day, he gained my eternal respect. She still doesn't know. Story 12. My mom chased my teenage brothers around the house inside and out with a dildo once. I had the chance to ask my brother about it later. He was pissed about it at the time, but I was like 6. And my mom was laughing so much so I thought everyone was having a good time. Looking back at it, I can see why he was pissed. Mom's dildo you, and why she thought it was so funny. Good memories. Story 13. My mom gave me a kidney and during our recovery she really wanted to see me, but the hospital wouldn't let her because she had complications from the surgery and was pretty out of it. But somehow she managed to slip out of her room and come find me. Mind you, I was on a completely opposite floor from her, so I don't know how the hell she found me. But anyway, it was my first official day eating solid food, so I was pretty excited until she got there. While I was eating here comes my mom into my room and for some reason she decided it was the perfect time to undress. I mean, full frontal view of my mom, bush and all, and she goes, "Michael, look at what they did to me. Look at these scars." Needless to say, I will never eat Fruit Loops again and not be reminded of that. Story 14. There was a time when my family lived in a tiny apartment. We had one bedroom with a double-deck bed. My parents slept on the bottom bunk, and my older sister and I slept at the top. Well, one night I wake up to the bed shaking and peeking below. I realized my parents were having fun. I was like maybe 8 or 9, so I wasn't really grossed out but just really confused. My sister slept through the entire thing. Or so I've always thought. Story 15. Oh God, this is very similar to a moment that still has me cringing. I was moving and my parents decided to help me move. My girlfriend and I have a fetish box as well. Strap-on, pumps, rope, that kind of stuff. Well, my GF, bless her heart, thought it would be funny and stealthy to label the box books. But the two O's having eyes, like chest. Yeah, we're mature. Anyway, I'm in the new place unpacking boxes, and my dad walks in with the books box. He says my name and says, "This box is really light for books. Let me make sure you got the right box here." No, I know what's in there. It's He cuts the box open and it's all there. I'm positive the stench of so many fluids have just invaded his nostrils. He just stares for about 20 seconds, taking it all in. At this point, I've gone past being ashamed. I'm ready for him to berate my desires. He closes the box and just walks away, which felt more like I'm just disappointed more than anything. About 20 minutes goes by, and he comes back in and just asks me, "No warm-up, why do you need another dong?" Well, it feels good. At that moment I realized my father, a rigid military, right-wing, had no idea what a strap-on was. And a boy that opened up a can of fricking worms. Story 16. My husband and I had to move in with his parents for about 3 months when we were having financial issues. As I have the very last bag in my hand ready to move to our new home, I sat the bag on the living room floor and went to the bathroom. When I came out, something was going off in the bag. I said, "It's probably our son's Thomas the Tank toy." My mom-in-law dives right in and pulls out my vibrator and holds it up for like 30 seconds, like she's the Statue of Liberty holding up her torch. My father-in-law and brother-in-law were also right there in the room. Needless to say, they still bring it up, and Thomas, the train is now code for vibrator in that family. Story 17. Had a girlfriend over. We did the nasty. I threw the used Ruber into the trash. Took her home, then came home to my mom and sister laughing their asses off. Turns out our dog ran up to my room, grabbed it out of the trash, and was playing with it while I was gone, and they found it. Story 18. After dating my ex-girlfriend for a few months some years back, I was to go over their house for Christmas Eve and spend the night to open up presents and have breakfast on Christmas morning. Me having my first real adult girlfriend made this incredibly nerve-wracking. I should also mention that I had a kidney transplant about 4 months prior as well. So we get there around noon to start making spaghetti for everyone that night. I'm fine with having a task like this, as it allows me to focus on something other than my nerves. Once my part in that was over, I decided to nervous drink, and I nervous drank a lot. Since I had a transplant recently, my tolerance was garbage. Party was fun, made friends, had laughs, but unfortunately, I blacked out towards the end of the party. Her sister said she saw me in the dad's office, laughing hysterically at the paper shredder, laying in the hallway singing show tunes, and running around the front of their house without my shirt or shoes on, in December, in the north. The worst moment was after everyone passed out. I was still up and moving around. The next thing I knew, I was being woken up by my girlfriend yelling at me on Christmas morning. "Did you crap in the hallway last night?" she asks, and I reply with the only answer I can come up with. "No?" She goes, "I bet you freaking did." So she goes into detective mode and pulls my pants down and looks at my butt, and yeah, I did. Stayed at my GF parents' house for Christmas, and their family woke up to 2 turds in their hallway and 2 turds of their toilet whoops. Story 19. I skipped school. I used to do it all the time because my dad worked 7 a.m. 5 p.m. most days and was a single father. I was in my room as per norm and he came home early. Didn't want to get caught, so stayed perfectly still. My bedroom's at the top of the stairs. The computer is right at the base of the stairs. Dad watches adult videos for the next hour. I think he heard a squeak because he stopped to holler up the stairs for me. But didn't budge, didn't move, didn't say anything. Just waited. 5 minutes pass. He's satisfied. Goes back to his business. Never told him. Never skipped school again. Story 20. My uncle's new wife was meeting the family for the first time, and after a glass of wine she asks if she can be herself. Everyone said yes. Then she asked my then 71-year-old grandpa if he sit at home watching adult videos and jacking off all day. Edit. This was our first time having her at a family function. We had met her in passing. At their wedding, I know it's weird. So no one really knew anything about her. We found out sometime later. She had started a brawl at her own wedding after we had departed, and my family is no longer welcome at American Legion. Story 21. When I was around 13, I was in bed awake on the couch in our mobile home. main bed went to my mother and 2 single beds in one room went to my sisters. My cousin and her fiancé were staying with us that night, on the only other bed, which was the table converted into a bed, in the sitting room kitchen room I was in. When they got home from being out on the town, I pretended to be asleep. I heard them start looking around for something and saying they couldn't find and it sounding very disappointed. I jokingly thought to myself, oh, they're mad because they can't find a Ruber. 5 minutes later, they found what they were looking for. 2 minutes later, they having fun about 3 feet away from me. At one point, I got a dead arm and had to adjust myself. I gave them both a heart attack, but they still didn't know I was awake. Story 22. When I was 14 or so, one of my cousins from my mom's side of the family came with us to my grandparents' dad's side of the family for Christmas Day. We were staying there the night with my entire extended family, which is a nightmare in itself. My dad's brother, after drinking all day and after finding out my cousin and I will be sharing a bed in the back of the 4WD, comes up to me and says, really slyly, "You and your little girlfriend are sharing a bed." I inform him that she is my cousin, and he just looks blankly at me and says, "That's okay. My first time was with my cousin." I hadn't mentioned this to anyone because it was weird and made me a little uncomfortable, but my cousin got married 2 weeks ago. At the reception, I told my dad about what his brother had said to me some 15 years ago. My dad just looked at me and says, "Yeah, we both had our first times with Shelley. My family is a bunch of cousin bangers." Edit 1. For everyone asking, my mom's name is Michelle. She gets called Shelley by family, friends, kid. It's awkward for me now. My dad grew up in a small village of around 40 people, 13 of which were his parents and siblings. If the choice is bang your cousin or bang your sister, probably choose cousin or neither. I personally choose neither. We're in Australia, not the hillbilly redneck woods of the US. Just FYI. Shelley is around 65 now. She's a couple of years older than my old boy. My grandma told me one year at Christmas that Shelley had a couple of abortions back in the late 60s, early 70s, and she has ruined a handful of marriages. She's never married or had kids. She lives in a retirement village. She's a crass, abrasive old crone who bangs. Good for her, I guess. Edit 2. Everyone asking if I've ever met my Aunt Shelley, or calling her an ALF. Do you understand how familial relationships work? My dad's cousin is not my aunt. She's my second cousin, first cousin once removed. Story 23. When I was a lot younger, I'm 29 now, my parents had some people over, including my one aunt and uncle who are incredibly straight-laced. Early on in the evening, in one of the family rooms, she put on a VHS tape to watch of a movie she remembered seeing back during a trip she took with my uncle years ago. Nothing was really happening with the get-together as of yet, since it was still really early in the evening. So some of us stuck around to see what movie it was, before more people came. Within the first 5 minutes, there were more topless girls and nudity in it than your average Skinamax flick nowadays. My aunt is absolutely mortified at this point, and says she doesn't remember any of this in the movie, while my mom, her sister, is laughing hysterically, grabs the remote from her and says she should keep it on just because what's going on is so ridiculous, and my aunt's reaction is just so funny. I think my mom's exact words were, "How the hell could you not remember any of this? There's so many tits on the screen I can't even see the plot." Everyone in the room is dying that she brought over what was essentially a softcore 80s sexploitation movie, with the subplot of there being some skiing thrown in there sporadically. My dad walks in since he hears everyone laughing, and he's just got the biggest WTF face on when he sees what's up, makes an about-face back towards the kitchen, and pours himself a drink. Story 24. When I was 18, I dated a girl. She lived about an hour away, so I would stay at her house overnight, but her parents wouldn't let us stay in the same room, so I slept in a guest bed in the basement. Being 18-year-olds, we would be up very late and go to bed around 2 a.m. Her dad was some kind of delivery driver and worked around 4. He came down to the basement every single morning before work and jerked to adult videos on the desktop computer while I was sleeping 10 feet away. There was only a couch between us, so the first couple times I lifted my head to see what he was doing before I realized. You better believe I didn't keep it a secret from her. I'd quietly text from under the blanket, "Your dad's jerking again," right next to me. Story 25. I was having trouble with my radiator and had no toolbox, so I asked my dad if I could borrow his. He came over and said he'd fix it for me. I hadn't had time to clean up since he only lives 2 minutes away, so he started reading me my rights about how messy my house is, etc. As he was lamenting over my clothes being on the floor, he opened my wardrobe to demonstrate how much room I had. In my wardrobe, there is a box. My dad looked down at the box. The box was open. The box was filled with fetish gear and toys. My dad closed the wardrobe and fixed my radiator. Story 26. Growing up, my brother and I used to share a room. Anyway, one night I get woken up by moaning and sounds of pain. I look over and my brother rolls out of bed, clutching his stomach, and runs out the room. Now imagine a chubby 9-year-old wearing nothing but loose boxers, hobbling, sprinting down the hall. I'm hit with this foul, foul smell, and I look down and there is a trail of wet, splattery poop everywhere. Brother finishes running, slams into the bathroom, and you can almost hear the sigh of relief. Except there wasn't. Turns out when he went to relieve his bowels, he had nothing left. Best part was that he didn't realize where had gone until he walked out the bathroom to see his legacy spread out behind him. Oh, and fun fact, we had extended family staying over that time, notably the hot cousin he was crushing on.